You are listening to the world's only podcast about Dungeons and Dragons advice. No plan, no problem.
You're alright. Hey.
I'm alright.
Hey. We're alright. Hey.
All together, alright.
Hey everybody, welcome to No Plan, No Problem, a weekly D&D advice podcast where two spooky dungeon masters go on a gothic quest to try and come up with 3 actionable tips for you to use in your next session. I'm your dungeon master, Anto.
And I want to suck your blood, Matthew Perkins.
You can find my stuff across the internet at icarus-games.co.uk.
And you can find my stuff over at matthewperkins.net. Anto, I'm pretty sure everybody's already guessed what we're talking about today, but why don't you fill them in?
Okay, today we are talking about the tax code in the state of Wyoming. No, we're talking about vampires, obviously. So, vampires are one of the classic monsters. You know, they date back well into mythology. They were popularized by Stoker's Dracula. They infiltrate almost every form of media imaginable, and they are everywhere. So we're going to talk about them.
And the adventurer helping us with our quest for our first tip today is Spectre G57 from the RD&D Next subreddit. And Spectre says, how do you run terrifying vampires? Anto.
Ooh.
How do you run them?
That is an excellent question, and I think that we're going to get a lot of juice out of that question. For me, a lot of what comes down to a really good vampire is the kind of suspense and the unseen of them.
Okay.
So rather than have them be up in your face and trying to bite you, it's that more kind of playful, toying with you aspect of a vampire that I really think makes them scary.
So like a vampire as a character rather than a vampire as a monster.
Yeah, so other than most vampires, if they're not vampire spawn, they're going to be intelligent creatures, they're going to be charismatic creatures, they're going to tend to be quite long-lived. And that gives a perspective to that creature that I think it's really valuable to consider when you're running them. You know, these are creatures that have probably lived for hundreds of years or more. These probably aren't the first adventurers that they've encountered. So you don't want to run them like a mindless beast that just runs into combat to die.
Yeah.
You know, they will have a sense of self-preservation, like most creatures should, but theirs will be born through an unlife of adventurers trying to kill them.
Yeah, it sounds like the vampire is less a monster that you throw out at the players from the monster manual and more of a villain that kind of influences your plot, either as like a mini boss or like maybe even your main big bad guy. Hey, there is a famous vampire in Dungeons and Dragons called Xanathar. No, called Strahd. Do you know much about Curse of Strahd?
I know little bits and pieces. It's one of the adventures that I would really like to run and play, but it's one of the ones that I've not had the chance to run and play.
It's so good. If I could live forever, I would play all of them. But Curse of Strahd is definitely worth your time because it's a gothic adventure. Like you said in the beginning, gothic in the sense of like castles and capes and candelabras and all that classic Bram Stoker, really, in retrospect, quite cheesy horror, pipe organs, but it's all, there's just something romantic about it, like romantic in the sense of nostalgia, not romantic in the sense of like, hey, I'm going to sleep with that vampire. Yeah. Though I might, I don't know.
I mean, for a lot of bards, you know, I think that one of the big benefits of an adventure like Curse of Strahd or running kind of a gothic adventure, something where the likes of vampires play a prominent role, is you do get to have that kind of heightened romanticism that I do think has kind of been lost from a lot of D&D. I think that the kind of trends have moved towards more serious and dramatic stories, whereas these kind of gothic romantic tales, they're a little bit larger than life. Everything is only as serious as the players are willing to take it, and you can very easily turn the dial from serious into camp without even meaning to, because of the kind of set pieces that you expect from something like a gothic story involving vampires in a castle.
Yeah. And what I really liked about Curse of Strahd as a gothic story was that as a player, I knew what my role in it was.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I didn't feel the need to try and win. I didn't feel the need to try and turn it into a Game of Thrones epic fantasy intrigue, as modern fantasy is.
Mm-hmm.
I just knew it's like my job is to like be the rube that opens the box full of spiders and ghosts and snakes. That's my job.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be delighted by going, whoa, oh no, ooh, that was spooky. Like, that's fun. And like, this is like, at one point, I think the DM just gave us a bag that was dripping with blood. Rad. That's so cool. Who cares what's in it?
Yeah. It's one of the, I think Curse of Strahd is one of the best examples of an adventure in which the players, even if they don't know what is going to happen in Strahd, they've got such it's so in the collective consciousness of D&D, and it plays on so many tropes through wider fiction that a player can go into Curse of Strahd blind, and very, very quickly they will establish, right, okay, we're killing Dracula. And that allows them to frame who their character is, why they're here, what their motivations are, really, really quickly, which is excellent, because that's one of the things that a lot of players really struggle with, is finding that kind of focus and who am I and where am I going. But in something like Strahd, it's like, I'm going to go kill Dracula.
I'm going to go kill a Dracula and, maybe fall in love. We'll find out. I don't know. We'll find out when I get there. What I find super interesting is Curse of Strahd is a horror adventure. Even though it's a gothic horror, it is still horror. D&D, the Wizards of the Coast people, they did do another horror adventure called Rime of the Frostmaiden that wasn't gothic horror. It wasn't that cheesy camp horror. Instead, it was modern kind of suspenseful horror, kind of like John Carpenter's The Thing. That's modern horror.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that Rime of the Frostmaiden has been as well received as Curse of Strahd.
No.
Because Curse of Strahd is, you're right, completely sitting in that collective mindset. Everybody knows where they fit on that stage of gothic horror. It's those black and white cheesy themes. It's those lightning bolts across a moonlit sky. It's those werewolves howling in the woods. Like, everybody knows that trope, and they know how to play into that. But Rime of the Frostmaiden, I think, doesn't necessarily have that kind of same collective clout.
No. And I think part of it comes from the kind of hook for Rime of the Frostmaiden, I don't think is necessarily strong enough. In your Curse of Strahd, you've got, you need to kill this Dracula allegory. In your Descent into Avernesses, you've got, you are going to hell. These really evocative premises that it's really easy to immediately identify with. Whereas in something like your Rimes of the Frostmaiden, it's, you're in a cold place, bad things will happen. It's too nebulous.
Yeah. And I guess it's the strength of the theme. And vampires, at their core, are a theme.
Yeah.
In any story, I know what a vampire is going to give me. Even though in some different iterations, in some different franchises, they have different rules. Like in some video games, they can go out during the sunlight. That's fine. Or like in Twilight, they're Edward Cullen and they're dreamy. Hey, by the way, I just want to put this out there. I unironically like Twilight. I've seen the movies. I genuinely like it. I thought it was like a really, not necessarily wholesome, but I thought it was like a really innocent kind of look at teen romance, especially in like, the early 2000s. I thought, like, nostalgia-wise, I really enjoy it. How do you feel about that?
Exactly the opposite in literally every way.
Really? Oh, no. Podcast over.
Here we go. Hard left into, this is a Twilight podcast now.
Wait. Let's say about Twilight fight to the end. Okay? At the end of this podcast, we will argue about Twilight. We got to talk about making Strahd scary. Vampires scary.
Just
somehow.
Vampires scary. I think
Vampires.
that for me, it comes down to, you want to impart the sense that this vampire is more powerful than the players. And I don't think that combat is the way you do that.
No.
Because either the vampire will kill them, in which case, good job, campaign over, or the vampire will die, in which case the players know for certain that they are stronger.
Would you use like your Dungeon Master meta powers to kind of like counteract the player's plans, or like have the vampire be omnipresent and like, round the corner when, of course, logically they shouldn't have been there? Like, oh, I saw you do that, and like show up in a moment of weakness.
That a way to kind of use that meta power. And actually, it's something that I think can really benefit you as a dungeon master anytime you want to run a bad guy, like a bad guy of note, is that just the assumption should be that the players aren't the first characters to try this, and that people have come here before or challenged this big bad before and failed, because that gives you pretty much all of the leverage you need as the dungeon master to go, right, okay, they're familiar, this vampire is familiar with the kind of spells that a group of adventurers is going to bring to try and defeat it. So it will have countermeasures because that last group or those last two groups all bought this kind of spell. So now the vampire has adapted to it.
Yeah.
And it's a good way to show that threat to the players without having to show them the vampire. They can find previous adventurers that have been slain. They can find accounts of those adventurers or the writings of people that said, oh, you know, this super powerful group went up to the castle and never returned, and all that good, juicy stuff.
Here's a challenging question to that notion. Do you think that when this person has said, how do you make vampires terrifying? Do you think that they're trying to make the vampires terrifying to the characters in the story? Or do you think that they're mainly trying to make the vampire terrifying to the players at the table? Like, which do you think is more important to them?
I think that they're probably trying to make the players terrified, because in probably the majority of cases, a player character is only really going to feel what a player feels. You know, I haven't encountered a huge number of players over the years that are really able to divorce those two feelings and be able to role play something as scared when they themselves are not.
Yeah.
Or any kind of emotion on a deep level. So I think what this dungeon master wants to do is they want to get the players into that headspace to help facilitate the role play of their characters better.
Well, then can I provide a little bit of direction for this tip and suggest that whatever we decide on doing to make this vampire terrifying shouldn't necessarily be about the vampire's statistics or in-game actions. It should be about the way you personify that vampire.
I think that is a really good way to approach any kind of horror, really, is play into the feeling that you're generating for the players and not the mechanics, because mechanics can help, but if your players aren't in that headspace to begin with, the mechanics can't solve it on their own.
Anto, it is very foolish of you to come here alone to this podcasting booth. What makes you so brave, huh?
Well, you don't know this.
Wait, are you a vampire as well? Are you a vampire?
You don't know this about me, but I am also a vampire.
Oh no, I'm so terrified.
Which is why I am so brave. Because we are just two disco vampires ready to have discotheque battle.
Okay, let's see if your discothequer is stronger than my discothequer.
In my mind, at that moment, both of our vampire characters like flew up into the air and started discothecing.
Yeah, and I can imagine like Van Helsing comes in from the right wing curtain and just crossbow both of us, just murders us. So when I played Curse of Strahd, this is theft, because this is not something that I did. This is something that my Dungeon Master Luke did for me. This is the first time I ever met him, and we were in a situation where the entire party was knocked unconscious except for my character, and I was literally running between them, doing CPR in just enough intervals to keep them from choking on their own tongues. I was just frantically running between them, and he appeared as Strahd, the big bad guy who I'd never met before. Yeah. And he was like just chatting to me casually the whole time, and I'm like frantically trying to not anger him so he doesn't murder me, because his MO is that he is going to toy with us while keeping all of my friends from failing their death saves. And Luke, when he played this moment expertly, he walked around the table. This is the first night I'd ever met this guy, pretty much. He walked around the table and he stood behind me. He was chatting to me. So I had to physically look up at him when we were chatting. And then he put his hand on my shoulder. And when he did that, when he made physical contact with me, Matt Perkins, I just panicked. Like, I was like, immediately the gravity of like what danger I was in really struck me. And suddenly, even though I am overtly like a genuinely confident person when I speak to people, it really intimidated me as a person.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I think that my character and me, Matt Perkins, were in parody with the way that we were behaving.
Yeah,
it was crazy, man.
That's complete side tangent, but that is the biggest thing I miss about being able to play in person in the current climate.
Oh, I miss people.
The physical interaction is so powerful as a dungeon master. You get up and move from behind that screen, and the players know that stuff is about to get real.
Yeah. It's so good. Like, physical contact's so important. Do you know what? I actually remember seeing Ivan Van Norman, who's a guy that works for Critical Role at the moment. I used to work for Geek and Sundry. He ran a game called Dread, which was a fantastic 6-episode series of this kind of mini game. It was really interesting. But he had this one situation, and this is another tangent. I'm so sorry for going on these tangents. He had a situation where he had a character perform a ritual where she had a goat skull in front of her, and her character was very compulsive. And the ritual said she has to tap this skull 13 times. She had a physical skull. She held it. She tapped it. While she was doing it, and counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, or whatever. At that moment of hitting 13, he grabbed her on the shoulders and like pulled her backwards, and she actually screamed.
Yes.
Like, it was terrifying, even as a viewer. Ooh.
There's so much juice that you can get, extra contextual juice that you can get from playing in person that I really do miss and that you don't get online. Like, I really do enjoy playing online in a lot of ways. You know, being able to sit there and run the game in my underpants. You know, there's benefit to that. But, you know, things like being able to go and have an interaction with another player and physically change the space between you is such a powerful thing. Being able to change the volume of your voice and it be immediately registered in a way that just doesn't happen online. You know, being able to get right up to someone's ear and whisper real soft is just something that doesn't really translate in a visual format unless you're physically in the same space.
Because if you yell online, they'll just mute you. Oh, he's been quite loud.
Yeah, or, you know, depending on the software you're using, you'll get auto compression put on and all these kinds of things. And there's real benefit to roleplay to be in the same space, to physically interact and to change things in a way that can heighten your kind of tension in the game and your sense, the player's sense of horror.
Can I?
But
go ahead.
I'm hesitant to be like, that's the tip because of the climate that we're in. Like, I want to keep searching for something else. That absolutely is a tip, but I want to search for something else that everyone can use in our current nightmare horror world.
But here's the thing. I want to be optimistic and presume that, like, in Australia at least, the nightmare horror world is easing off. Like, I've played D&D in person last week. How do you feel about that? I played D&D in person. I saw people. I've seen them. They're real.
Hideously jealous.
I think it should be the tip. Can I just articulate the tip? Let me do the tip. Okay.
Do the tip.
The tip is, in order to make vampires more terrifying, or anything more terrifying, is to utilize your physical presence, you know, the volume of your voice, the your stature, maybe your physical touch with the players, you know, permission. If they don't want to be touched, don't touch them. But you can use your physical preference and your physical presence and your, let me rephrase that. You can use your physical presence and your physical menace to become a really intimidating force at your table to really personify your vampire.
That is such a good tip. And I think that if you are playing online, I highly encourage you to start using cameras and start using webcams so that you can all see each other, because it kind of bridges that gap and gets you that little bit closer to the in-person experience. And at least then you can physically act out your mannerisms when you're playing an NPC or a villain in such a way to convey that some of that extra contextual information that you just don't get purely with voice.
Excellent. Hey, Anto, should we roll for sponsorship?
Let's do this thing. Today's episode is sponsored by our buddy Steve at Lunch Break Heroes and the Deck of Many Quests, now on Kickstarter. The Deck of Many Quests is a tool for dungeon masters and adventurers alike. Think Cards Against Humanity meets Dungeons & Dragons, minus the bathroom humour. With the Deck of Many Quests, you will be able to generate quests for your players to go on by drawing cards from 3 different decks. You have the quest card that details the challenge you'll be setting for your players, and then you have an item card and a creature card to give information for the quest that you'll be going on. Each deck contains 200 cards, including 50 quest cards, 75 item cards, and 75 creature cards, giving you over 200,000 unique combinations to generate quests for your next D&D game. The campaign is running until April the 2nd, and you'll find a link to the Kickstarter page in the show notes. Thanks again to Lunch Break Heroes for supporting the show.
And if you're enjoying this podcast, which is no plan, no problem, then you can find us all across the internet at NPNP Podcast. We're on Twitter, we're on TikTok, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on all of the books, my friend. Every book you can find us. But if you're enjoying this podcast, specifically this episode, don't forget to leave a like and follow and leave your 5-star review on iTunes, all that good jazz. We've also got a Patreon where you can find all kinds of behind-the-scenes content and playable content for your table. We really appreciate the support. And hey, let's get back to the podcast. It's a breaking news here on No Plan, No Problem. We have some breaking news coming in. Our reporter Anto is in the field. What do you have for us, Anto?
Well, Matt, there seems to be some kind of delay with the news, given that our breaking news is several weeks late at this point, but we're going to talk about Gothic lineages.
Oh, okay. That's the Unearthed Arcana, right?
That is the Unearthed Arcana.
It stays in the podcast. Keep going.
It stays in the podcast. Everything is content. So Wizards recently put out a new Unearthed Arcana playtest packet for Gothic lineages that include 3 new playable race types for you to use with your characters, and one of them was the Dhampir, the half vampire.
Oh, half. So I don't know anything about this Unearthed Arcana, so I'm going to need you to explain it to me in detail. The Dhampir. What is a Dhampir?
So the Dhampir is a character race that has roots for multiple editions now. You used to be able to play them in previous editions, and personally, they're the race that I've been looking forward to seeing come into 5th edition probably the most. And they are a half vampire, essentially. They are born of vampiric lineage. They're born from someone who has lain with a vampire, and they are the hellish spawn that is the result of that.
Oh, like when Edward Cullen and the human girl, when they have a baby, that would be a Dhampir, right? In Twilight? The Dhampir?
Yes.
Good. Yeah, good. I'm glad you like Twilight. That's good. Go on. Yeah, go on.
Now, in this Unearthed Arcana, it's slightly different in how the kind of creation of a Dhampir works. You can become a Dhampir later on in life and basically play as a vampire. But traditionally, they were a born race rather than a made race as you progress in your adventuring career. But they are...
Okay.
What I find interesting about them is these new lineages are the first multi-type creatures that we've had in 5e. So a Dhampir is humanoid and undead.
Oh, like kind of like a template that you apply to a different race?
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah. So when you become a Dhampir, or when you start out as a Dhampir, you are humanoid and undead, which means that anything that affects one of those 2 traits affects you. So if you use a spell that only targets undead, it will target the Dhampir. If you use something that's only going to affect a humanoid, it will affect the Dhampir, which is a nice kind of mechanical reflection of this kind of duality and this dual life that they lead.
Yeah. Because, like, you could turn undead yourself. If you were a cleric, there's probably rules for turn undead. I'm presuming that turn undead lets you target things. But that's pretty interesting. I imagine, like, if you were a Dhampir, and imagine the absolute drama when you fight a paladin and suddenly they're smiting, all your allies and stuff, and it's dealing a lot of damage because they're a paladin. That's what they do. But when they smite you, it's like, oh Jesus, oh no, oh save me, oh God.
we're going to get onto Smite, because Smite is a real interesting thing.
Really? Do they do a special thing? Okay, I don't want to get ahead of myself. Go ahead.
So I'll give you kind of an overview of the Dhampir. It says that they're poised between the worlds of the living and the dead. They retain their grip on life, yet are endlessly tested by vicious hungers, which is one of the things that I find most compelling about a Dhampir, or this kind of undead style creature, is that while they might be humanoid and an adventurer and going out on these adventures, they are also undead and have vampiric lineage, and they have that hunger that needs to be sated. So in the listing, it gives you some examples of things that you can hunger for. So it says, most of them are going to hunger for blood, as is classic with a vampire, but here are some alternative things that you can hunger for. You can hunger for...
I'm a vegan. Am I allowed to hunger for like carrots? Can I just love carrots or something? Or sushi?
No, but there are hungers that aren't consuming someone's flesh. So blood and flesh are an option. You've also got cerebral spinal fluid, which is just very specific. But then
a little bit icky.
You've got psychic energy, life energy, dreams.
Wait, dreams, energy? What is this?
Yeah, you can hunger for the dreams of others.
I feed on Virgos. Like, what's happening?
Yeah. You can hunger for the color from one's appearance.
Wait, you can drink colors?
Which is such a vague and broad thing. I would assume that means that you enjoy kind of the playful side of vampires and the kind of the shock when someone's color drains. That's what I would internalize that as.
I'm blue, ba-da-dee-da-ba-da, give me blue. I'm a vampire, blue, ba-da-ba, give me blue.
But the idea of a Dhampir that explicitly wants to go around and find different colors to consume and be like, ooh, this food is blue. I need to take the blue out of it, and they take the blue out of the food.
Hey everybody, I'm just Bob Ross the vampire. I'm just here to collect you a little bit of blue. And then after the bit, we're going to get a little bit of red. We're going to combine those to make a beautiful little tree. Happy little trees here. I'm a vampire, Bob Ross.
So gliding on away from those esoteric humours, let's talk a little bit about what the Dhampir can do. So I said that they are humanoid and undead. In terms of what they get, they're interesting stuff. They get dark vision, which is so commonplace in 5th edition that I think it should just be assumed that every creature's going to get it at this point.
We should do a whole episode on dark vision.
It would just be 45 minutes of just screaming into the void. They get an ability called Spider Climb, which gives them a climbing speed, and then from 3rd level, they can just walk along any surface that they want, hands free, just walking along the ceilings. Super creepy. And then the juiciest part is they get a vampiric bite. So they have fangs, which they can use as a natural weapon, but more importantly, it counts as a simple melee weapon, which, coming back to our divine smite ability here, divine smite can be applied to any melee weapon attack, which means you can smite bite.
You can smite bite.
You can be a Dhampir paladin, and you can smite bite.
That's actually pretty rad. That's rad. Because here's the thing. The person that's going to play a vampire is definitely a very edgy player. The kind of person who plays a vampire is like, you wouldn't understand me. You don't talk to me. You don't understand.
Definitely.
I've got a dark past. I'm a good boy, but I've done bad boy things. And they would love to be Blade. They would love to be that. Blade was a vampire paladin, right?
I mean, I think a strong argument could be made for it. Like a vampire, a vampire vengeance paladin.
Yeah, but did he smite bite? Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
I mean, I may be misremembering, but I feel like at one point, doesn't he get injected with something and then bite someone and put that thing into them and make them explode? Is that a thing he does?
Maybe. I did watch them a month ago, but honestly, they deleted themselves from my memory. Now. Yeah, that's a good point. They did now.
But yeah, so you get the bite. You can recover, it does 1d4 damage, and you can recover HP on any damage it does as you like suck the creature's blood. But I think the smite bite is the real reason to play a vampire.
But like, okay, so biting is relevant to vampires if they are drinking blood, and biting is relevant to vampires if they are chomping boys. But what if like a vampire is eating blue, or a vampire is eating dreams, or like eating, star signs? Do they really need their bite? Is that how they engage with their prey? What do you reckon?
Well, maybe that is how they do it. Maybe they bite you, and instead of drawing on your blood, you feel your dreams being siphoned off into them. And that would be actually a really interesting kind of role play thing to go through of how do you describe to the player their dreams being taken from them.
That would be really fun. I think that would really challenge yourself as a writer, because imagine just trying to describe a dreamless sleep, not just a sleep where you don't remember your dreams, but a dream that is completely empty.
Not even that, but that dreams is a broad enough term that what if it means ambition?
Oh.
And what if what you're actually hungering for is people's ambitions? And draining someone means robbing them of all ambition.
What if a vampire could drain other kind of personality traits? What if a vampire that took away like your anxiety, and suddenly you go, okay, this vampire has bitten you, it has taken your anxiety and fed upon that negative energy. Your character is now fearless. The next time that you feel the need to retreat, you do not retreat.
Yes, I like this. Let's keep going down this road because I can feel the juice ahead. The idea of a vampire that, let's say they drink blood, but it also takes something else away, because I think the drinking of blood is so key to vampirism and to the archetype of the vampire that taking it away robs you of some of that gothic romanticism that we talked about before. So they take your blood.
Well, you've got to get your protein somehow, right?
Exactly. So they take the blood, but they also take something else. And changing what they take is such an interesting way to make vampires feel unique. Like a vampire that takes away your anxiety, that is another reason for people to willingly go to this vampire, because in almost all vampire myth, you have the people that willingly go to be fed upon. And a lot of times that doesn't make sense outside of kind of, certain cultures. But if the vampire can take something negative away from you, that's a justifiable reason, that's it. Probably cheaper than therapy. Yeah,
and especially because like when somebody does get fed upon by a vampire in classic traditions, that person, their personality does change. Like the word for a person that is enamored with a vampire is a thrall, as in they are enthralled. So when you become a vampire's thrall, you become their kind of servant. Like I think I want to say Nicolas Cage was a thrall in a vampire movie at some point, but I don't remember.
I mean, it seems within his wheelhouse.
I think he'd be a great thrall. So that's a good point. Like, what is drawing the vampire's thrall to them? And it is that somehow the vampire can take away some kind of negative emotion or some kind of harmful feeling.
Because doing that, not only do you add a new dimension to your vampire, it's not just, they're this creature that lives in a castle and drinks blood. They have something else attached to them. They're taking away people's anxieties, or they rob your dreams.
Okay, so is
the dream one is super evocative.
I like the dream one, but I think that the dream one is specifically too unspecific to be useful. You know what I mean? Like you could do it, but like would the player care? I don't know. Like you would have to make them care somehow.
Yeah.
But can I word the tip here?
Go for it.
I think I might have worded the last one. I don't know. But the tip is vampires drink blood and
yes.
That's the tip.
I think that dreams is a broad enough one. Like, broad enough that it could be a problem. But if you decided that your vampire was going to be a dream drinker before the game, then you incorporate that into your session 0. You specifically get your players to tell you what their character's dreams are. Like, you say, what are your both your aspirations and that sense of dream, and ask them what is a recurring dream that you've had, or like a recurring dream and a recurring nightmare that you've had.
Yeah, they take your nightmares as well. That's cool. Hey, we're struggling now because we've just said the tip and we're still going. What kind of crazy land are we in?
We're in the land of chaos now.
We got to end this level of land of chaos. The vampire drinks your ability to end a podcast, but we still have one more tip to go.
Yeah, so the adventurer helping us find our third tip is the Ashtray Girl over on Twitter. If you're not following us on Twitter, you should go over there right now, NPNP Podcast, and give us a follow. And the Ashtray Girl says, which vampire from pop culture do you think would translate best to D&D? I know most things can be transferable, but is there one particular pop culture vampire that you think would be amazing for a one-shot or a campaign?
Edward Cullen, Twilight, fight me.
I knew you were going to say that.
Fight me, Anto. It's time. Okay. Wait, can I put my case forward?
Yeah, you put your case forward. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, before you start fighting. Okay, so Edward Cullen is, above all, a character. Okay, he is a person with a personality. Okay, he's not a monster. He has a personality. Number two, he is powerful, in the sense that he has a special ability above all the... I don't know how familiar you are with Twilight, but anybody listening, Edward Cullen is fast. He can outrun a car. Of all the other vampires in his clan, he is very quick. Edward Cullen is loyal, okay? Edward Cullen is loyal to a fault to Bella. He self-sacrifices himself for her multiple times, every movie, just ad nauseum. I think that he's... Okay, Edward Cullen is the perfect vampire. Fight me.
Isn't Edward Cullen like super toxic and abusive though? Like isn't he like
he is
hundreds of years old and enters into this relationship with a teenage girl who's in a vulnerable state, like new in town, and he preys on that and is like, oh, you couldn't possibly understand me, and leads her into situations where she's like, oh, but I can understand you and I can fix you, and he's like, nobody can fix me because I'm a vampire and I will kill you, so you need to move away from me. But don't go. Please don't go. I'm going to kill you, but don't go.
He doesn't say don't go, I don't think. I think that he does say, like, hey, like straight up, this is not a good idea. You should not do this. He does do some toxic things. That's absolutely correct. Specifically about the age, I completely agree with that. Usually, what's the rule? Like half your age plus 3? So he's 100 years older or whatever.
Half your age plus 7, I think.
Plus 7. But Edward Cullen does do some problematic things as far as relationships go. But as far as vampires go, I think that he's good. Like, he does have a romantic kind of smoldering energy. I'm pretty sure that in the script for Twilight, they didn't have any dialogue written for Edward. They just said, every time it came up to his name, it just said, start smoldering. Start smoldering, Robert Pattinson. You've got this.
I mean, in that sense, yes, Edward Cullen fits a lot of what you want from kind of the perfect vampire, in as much as it plays into that romanticism. There is that danger, and they are able to draw people in, enthrall people into relationships that are very clearly not okay.
Yes.
So I'll concede with that. I will not concede that he is a perfect boyfriend.
But no, he's not a perfect boyfriend, I suppose. But he is a perfect vampire. Like, it's actually, you just said something that really got me. Danger. Mm-hmm. He is like attractive, but dangerous.
And I think...
And actually, hey, let's step outside the podcast real quick. Robert Pattinson, he is an incredible actor. He's done some incredible movies, man. Have you seen The Lighthouse?
I haven't. It's been on my list for a long time, and I know that he's said to be fantastic in it.
It's an incredible movie. The Lighthouse is definitely not a movie you should watch with anybody else in the room, but like watch it by yourself and then just keep it to yourself. Don't mention it on a podcast because people will judge you. It's so strange and so beautiful.
Like I had no interest in another Batman film until Robert Pattinson got attached to that project, and I was like, he is an interesting enough actor that I am willing to give this a go purely for him.
He's gorgeous. He's a beautiful person. It's incredible.
He is.
But he's also in a band. I haven't heard his band. Maybe his band...
I didn't know that.
Maybe his band sucks. Because I remember being like an edgy teenager and be like, oh, Twilight sucks. Oh, Twilight's stupid. Oh, Robert Pattinson. Oh, so stupid. Oh, he's got a crap band. Oh. But when I watched it as an adult, I was like, oh, Look, I get that this is juvenile, but that doesn't mean it's bad. Like, sometimes I feel good about juvenile things.
Yeah, the kind of juvenile side of it is never what bothered me about Twilight. It was that kind of the way it establishes such a toxic relationship in a frame that so many young people are like, that is what I want. It's the problem I have with young people who look at like Joker and Harley Quinn as like, oh, that's the kind of thing I want, because damn, it's problematic.
Anybody that likes Batman or the Joker is immediately someone that I don't want to talk to. You know what I mean? Like, everyone's like, well, who would win out of Batman or Superman? And I'm like, man, I can't do this. I gotta go. I gotta bail. I gotta go to work. Hey, I'm unemployed. I gotta go to work.
But I do think that Edward Cullen does fit a lot of the mold that you want from the romantic idea, romantic as in the movement rather than romance, the gothic romance of a vampire in a modern setting. I think that...
Who would be your pick, though? So here's the thing. I accidentally just bloody railroaded this thing. I said Edward Cullen. Who would be your pick for your perfect pop culture vampire?
The vampire that I would like to draw into D&D isn't a character, it's a vampire type. I would want the kind of neo-vampires from Blade 2. You know, the ones that have got like the predator mouth?
Yeah.
Those things freak me the out.
Yeah, have you noticed how often we talk about Blade?
I mean, you know, it's a solid franchise.
It is.
Wesley Snipes is fantastic in it, and
it is good. How good's Tax Evasion, Wesley Snipes?
It's good.
Sorry. Too soon.
But those kind of, I can't remember what they're called. I call them neo-vampires because they're all, you know, skinheads. But those vampires, man, they freak me out. The weird mandible thing and just how viscerally aggressive
can I describe them for our audience, just so in case they haven't seen the movie?
Yeah, go for it.
So this neo-vampire is specifically a kind of vampire that feeds not off humans, but off other vampires. And the way they do so is they have a specific joint that runs down the cleft jawline, and their mouth opens up, their jaw splits in half and opens into a triad of just teeth and a kind of like worm-like tongue that just latches on to an entire creature's face and starts pulsing and drinking their life essence. They specifically feed off vampires, and they are terrifying.
The pure aggression of them is something that I really enjoy and think that make them really interesting, because it's a nice counterpoint to that gothic romance of the traditional vampire. But I think that the fact that they feed on vampires sets them apart as well, because you can then build up such an interesting storyline where the players are going after a vampire, they encounter this vampire, they think that the vampire is what they're after, and then they come to find the vampire dead and something else has drank from it. Because then they get to the point where, what drinks a vampire?
Look, I like that a lot. You know, I love Edward. I love Edward. I love Edward. And yet, I think that is actually pretty cool, just for the fact that it's a really interesting plot point, a really nice story beat to subvert the classic vampire storyline. You even set up their classic vampire castle. They go through this gothic adventure with vampire bats and mist and fair maidens fainting and all that kind of stuff. And they get to the throne room where someone's playing the organ, but there's nobody there. There's nobody there. There's just the drained vampire. And the real vampire is the vampire. It's me, the vampire. I drink vampires. Hey, watch out. It's me, the vampire.
I thought you...
Hey, anybody seen any vampires around here? I'm going to vamp them. Oh, I'm the vampire. That
certainly would set the appropriate level of terror in me.
I'm worried that I'm undermining the horror with my vampire.
No. It's definitely more scary. We need to find a tip for this, though.
Oh, no. I forgot we were doing a podcast. Oh, no. Is the tip don't use vampires?
I mean, possibly. I think that the tip might be to look at other creatures and other media to see how you can morph your vampire, which is kind of a through line that we're getting through tip 2 and possibly 3 is changing the vampire in different ways.
Hey, wait. I got to interrupt you. This sucks. This is a crap. We can do better. I don't know how. And don't lie to me how, but we can't just do tip 2 and tip 3 being the same tip. That's what they sign up. Listen, they're paying through the nose for this podcast, these listeners. They're paying $12,000 an episode, even if they don't know it, for 3 tips. Not 1 tip and then 2 other tips that are the same tip. We can't do them dirty. We've got to give them 3 tips.
We've got to give them 3 tips.
We've got to give them 3 tips.
Which means we have to explore further.
Oh, I can't explore further. We just got to intuit something from what we said already because I don't have the energy. There's only limited room in this recording tent that I've built for myself. Limited air, and I don't want to suffocate in this little box.
That is a good point. You will die if you spend much longer in that booth.
I will die. Okay, so we talked about vampires that feed on vampires, and we talked about Edward Cullen being romantic. And it was, which vampire do you want to rob? What was the tip you were going to suggest again?
I was going to suggest that you draw on other traits and elements to add on to your vampire, which is essentially what we said for tip 2. They drink blood and...
No. That is the tip. I don't have any other ideas. That's the tip. Okay, we did a podcast.
So I think the tip would be to use elements from other creatures to make your vampires that much more different and thus heighten the horror of them, of the unknown.
Yeah, that's so exciting because if you subvert what the shape of a vampire is, then suddenly the players don't get to rely on their assumptions of how a vampire operates. Hey, I'm a vampire. I just became a little bit Italian. I suppose vampires can be Italian.
Yeah, vampires can be anyone.
They can be anyone. They could be you. They could be me. They are me. Hey, we've done a podcast. Can I get you, please, Anto? Can I please get you to reiterate what these tips are? Because I've forgotten. What are they?
Okay. Tip number 1 was, when possible, use your physical presence to heighten the horror in your game. So,
Blair.
Get up close. Touch. Feel. Noise. All those physical things in the real world.
Blair.
Tip 2 was vampires drink blood and...
Blair.
And tip 3 was to use elements from other creatures to enhance your vampire and subvert the expectation of what the players think they know about the vampire.
That was all my 3 vampire impersonations. Hey everybody, my name's been Matthew Perkins. You can find my stuff over at matthewperkins.net.
And I have been Anto, and you can find my stuff at icarus-games.co.uk.
Oh, I did not know you were doing accents. I didn't know we were doing accents at the end, and now here I am. Hey, I can't do this anymore. This song that's going to play us out is called All Together by a band called House Hats. Please support us on social media, NPNP Podcast. Thank you for listening. No plan, no problem. Bye-bye. Goodbye.
I'm alright.
Bye-bye.
We're right. Hey, 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 all